Hello everyone, today we're diving into a case tangled in moral complexity where the line between right and wrong, victim and perpetrator becomes blurred beyond belief. In a world where black and white seem so clear-cut, real life often tells a different story. What happens when someone is both a victim and the one responsible for a crime? How does the sword of justice fall? Our story begins with the mysterious disappearance of a young woman beautiful and full of life in a quiet small town. At the same time, a middle-aged man is found dead in his own home under unsettling circumstances. What really happened here? Let's turn back the clock to 2014 and unravel the details. The setting is Kansas, right in the heart of America. Known as the Sunflower State for its endless golden fields, Kansas thrives on agriculture, producing massive amounts of wheat, corn, and soybeans. Beyond farming, the state is a hub for aerospace manufacturing and energy industries. Wichita, its largest city, is even nicknamed the air capital of the world for its strong aviation legacy. And it's here in Kansas where our story unfolds. On a freezing winter day, January 17, 2014, the events began to take shape. The Douglas County Police Department received an urgent call from a concerned mother. Her daughter, Sarah McLean, had been missing for 3 days and no one could reach her. Detectives immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation and launched a search. The first lead revealed that before vanishing, Sarah had been living with a man named Harold Hal Sasko. Hal was in his early 50s, divorced, and a father to twin teenage daughters. He owned 3 pizza restaurants and was financially secure. Sarah first met Hal when she was only 14, working part-time at one of his restaurants. Sarah was a sensitive soul, having grown up with little emotional support. At 16, her parents' divorce left her feeling adrift and deeply wounded. It was during this turbulent time that Hal stepped in, offering guidance, kindness, and a sense of stability, almost like a father figure. They kept in touch and their bond grew stronger over the years. After Sarah graduated high school, Hal invited her to live in his home in Lawrence. Under the same roof, their relationship seemed close, warm, and protective. But as investigators dug deeper into Sarah's disappearance, they uncovered a troubling detail: Hal had also gone missing at the exact same time. This strange coincidence raised an urgent question. Could Hal have been the one to take Sarah? Police quickly moved to check Hal's house. From the outside, it looked unusually quiet and still. After knocking several times without an answer, officers decided to force the door open. The moment they stepped inside, they were struck by a heavy, unsettling smell in the air, signaling that something very wrong had happened. Inside the house, chaos was evident. Empty beer bottles lay scattered across the floor, a clear sign that something had gone terribly wrong. In the living room, the body of a man was found lying motionless, his face pale, his hands and feet bound. A severe injury to his neck suggested the attack had been deliberate and calculated. On the opposite wall, the word "freedom" was written in what appeared to be a reddish-brown substance, adding a disturbing element to the scene. The initial investigation confirmed the victim was the homeowner Hal Sasko. Strangely, despite the violent nature of the attack, there were no signs of a struggle. Forensics found traces of a strong sedative in several beer bottles at the scene, indicating the victim had likely been drugged beforehand, a clear sign of premeditation. Sarah was nowhere to be found. Her phone was left on the kitchen counter, and Hal's car was also missing. At first, detectives suspected an outside attacker who had harmed Hal and kidnapped Sarah before escaping with the car. If true, Sarah could be in grave danger. Authorities quickly issued a nationwide alert for Hal's vehicle. Surveillance revealed that on January 14th, the car had been seen traveling on a Kansas highway before crossing into Oklahoma later that same day. Notably, Sarah was caught on a store security camera calling her grandmother from a convenience store along that route. This was a relief for investigators and Sarah's family. She was alive. However, the footage raised even more questions. Sarah appeared to be alone, showed no signs of distress, and was the one driving Hal's car. Then a chilling piece of information came from Greg Kelly, Hal's nephew. A month or 2 before the incident, Greg had visited Hal's home and only found Sarah there. He recalled a disturbing conversation in which she insisted on demonstrating a survival skill. involving a rabbit she had prepared for cooking. This memory immediately came back to him after hearing of Hal's death. Additionally, Sarah's co-workers revealed she had taken several days off, claiming a family member had passed away. Investigators later confirmed this was untrue. With mounting evidence, Sarah McLynn, just 19 years old, shifted in the eyes of the police from a potential victim to the prime suspect. After a week-long multi-state search, the National Park Service tracked her down near Miami, Florida. She was sightseeing at Everglades National Park when officers moved in. Her calm demeanor during the arrest left many stunned, struggling to reconcile the quiet young woman with the accusations she now faced. On January 26, 2014, Detective Jamie Olson from Florida sat down with Sarah for a 3-hour interview. Throughout the questioning, Sarah showed no visible signs of guilt. Instead, she calmly recounted the entire sequence of events. She admitted that she had been contemplating removing him from her life for some time. That day, she decided to follow through with the plan. She left work early, and around 5:30 p.m. on January 13, 2014, she crushed sleeping pills and mixed them into Hal's beer. When he began to drift into unconsciousness, she secured him to a chair before carrying out the act. Her demeanor as she described this remained remarkably steady. Sarah also explained that her trip to Florida wasn't an attempt to run away, but simply to see the ocean one more time before she was inevitably caught, an experience she believed she might never have again. When asked why she wrote the word freedom on the wall, she said it reflected her truest emotion at that moment. Later standing in this courtroom, Detective Olson recalled that Sarah didn't come across as a cold-blooded killer, but rather as someone who for the first time felt like she had stepped into the sunlight after years in the dark. After confessing, Sarah's case quickly moved to trial. The preliminary hearing took place on March 16, 2015. In court, she did not deny ending Hal's life, but presented an important claim she suffered from a severe mental illness. Prosecutors rejected this assertion, calling it a fabrication to escape responsibility. To clarify, psychologist Marilyn Hinson spent 17.5 hours interviewing Sarah and ultimately diagnosed her with severe dissociative identity disorder, along with depression and anxiety. The revelation shocked everyone. How could someone just 19 years old be living with such profound psychological issues? Deeper investigation revealed the roots of her condition lay in her troubled childhood. As the saying goes, when parents fight, children suffer. Sarah grew up in a home filled with constant arguments between her parents, leaving her feeling unsafe and emotionally neglected. Frequent school changes during her formative years meant she never had time to settle in or form lasting friendships, further isolating her. At 16, her parents' divorce delivered a devastating blow to her already fragile mental state. Even more tragically, during that period, she endured abuse from a neighbor, leaving lasting burn scars on her body. Those scars were more than just physical marks, they became symbols of deep psychological trauma. She was later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. Under the weight of repeated emotional injuries, Sarah developed 4 distinct personalities, and it was one of these alternate identities that carried out the killing of Hal. Following psychiatric evaluation, the court accepted that Sarah suffered from mental illness. However, this did not lessen the severity of her charges. Prosecutors argued that the act was not a sudden outburst, but rather a carefully orchestrated plan, a deliberate and premeditated killing. Under the law, if a crime is committed solely as a result of mental illness or disability, without the intent to harm the perpetrator, may not be held criminally responsible. But in Sarah's case, the evidence showed she had calculated her actions well in advance, something she herself openly admitted. On April 8, 2015, the court sentenced Sarah McLynn to 55 years in prison, without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. This meant she would not be eligible for release until she was nearly 70 years old. The sentence shocked the public, a young woman only 19 now branded as a murderer. What baffled many was why Sarah would harm Hal so severely, given that all previous accounts described their relationship as close, almost father-daughter. Even with her diagnosed mental illness, the motive seemed unclear. Was there something hidden behind this case? The answer was yes. To truly understand someone's actions, we must look at the full picture, the underlying motives, the unseen struggles, because only then can we approach the truth. On May 25th, 2021, after 6 years behind bars, Sarah once again stood before the court. This time, her sentence was reduced from 50 years to 25 years. The decision stirred heated debate across the country. Why was the punishment suddenly cut in half? Surely the court had weighed significant factors before making such a move. As the public searched for answers, the Kansas Reflector released court records, police documents, and other confidential information. What emerged completely changed the way people saw Sarah's actions. It turned out that Harold Hal Sasko was far from the generous father figure many believed. Behind closed doors, he subjected Sarah to manipulation and exploitation for a long period. After graduating high school, Sarah accepted Hal's invitation to live at his home in Lawrence as a tenant. A photograph taken that day captured a smiling young woman, unaware that what awaited her was a nightmare. Inside Hal's home, alcohol and illicit substances were readily available, all supplied by him. This was only the first step in his calculated plan. Hal pretended to care for Sarah, telling her he would treat her like his own daughter. But in truth, he was creating a dependency to slowly take control of her life. 6 months later, the mask came off. Hal began making advances towards Sarah. When she refused, his demeanor changed. He threatened her, saying that if she wanted to stay, she would have to pay with her body. For Sarah, who had always longed for a real family and considered Hal a father figure, the betrayal was devastating. Out of fear and desperation, she complied, sacrificing her dignity to hold on to what she thought was a home. From then on, Hal tightened his grip. He took control of Sarah's bank cards, fabricated debts, and warned her that if she tried to leave, she would end up homeless. The pressure, emotional, psychological, and physical, left her trapped, reduced to someone with no freedom over her own life. Hal even boasted to neighbors about his beautiful 18-year-old daughter. Later, he coerced Sarah into undergoing cosmetic surgery, charging her $6,000 for a nose job. When he couldn't convince doctors to perform breast augmentation because of her age, he arranged for a different procedure, a cosmetic enhancement surgery, and added another $10,000 to her so-called debt. He told her that only when the debt was paid would she be free. For 10 months, Sarah lived under the same roof as Hal, enduring his invasive behavior 2 to 3 times a week. Overwhelmed and unable to confront the harsh reality, Sarah turned to alcohol and substances to numb her pain. By late December 2013, her mental health was unraveling. She left a Google search history with queries like, "Why do my thoughts feel so strange?" In a text to her sister, Sarah confessed she felt like a caged animal teetering on the edge of losing her mind. Facing Hal was impossible, and facing herself was even harder. The substances in her room offered fleeting relief, but they were like a drop in the ocean compared to her suffering. The relentless torment shattered Sarah's already fragile emotional world. A dark thought began to take root in her mind. On the morning of January 13th, 2014, Hal offered a hollow apology for his past actions. Later at 5:15 p.m., he texted Sarah to put some beer in the fridge. She knew what would follow after drinking. Hal's predatory behavior would resurface. It was a pattern she'd endured countless times, but this time she refused to let it happen again. Sarah slipped a sedative into Hal's beer. After drinking it, he quickly fell into a deep sleep. That night, Sarah made the irreversible decision to end the life of the man she once saw as a father figure. When the police investigated, they uncovered disturbing evidence on Hal's phone, hundreds of violent, explicit videos, many involving minors. Hal had also been manipulating his twin 16-year-old daughters with lavish gifts, cash clothes, phones, and even a motorcycle to lure them to his home. In Hal's bedroom, police found a camera and a hard drive containing images of Sarah, though the details were kept confidential. They also discovered a selfie Hal had sent to Sarah, further exposing his depravity. The evidence painted a clear picture Hal was a dangerous and predatory individual. From the moment he met 14-year-old Sarah, he had targeted her, methodically drawing her into a nightmare over the years that followed. Shockingly, the evidence that could have supported Sarah's case was deliberately suppressed. Sarah had confided in her defense attorney, Carl Cornwell, about Hal's abusive behavior. But in a closed press conference before the 2015 trial, prosecutor Charles Branson argued that revealing Sarah's abuse to the jury was unnecessary. He dismissed the evidence as an attempt by the defense to garner sympathy, claiming it was irrelevant to the case. Branson also argued that publicizing Sarah's abuse could attract media attention, potentially compromising the trial's fairness. Even more surprising, Sarah's attorney Carl Cornwell agreed with this stance. At the trial, he focused solely on Sarah's mental health struggles, completely avoiding any mention of Hal's heinous actions. After the preliminary hearing, Sarah was devastated and confused to learn that her own lawyer had failed to present the evidence of Hal's abuse and manipulation. Sarah once said, "I'm not trying to avoid responsibility, but I want a fair trial. If you don't tell the whole story, how can anyone decide what's truly fair?" After her conviction, prison officials refused to let her speak to the press, claiming it would interfere with operations. Only appropriate news topics would be allowed, they said. Sarah often felt there was no one to turn to, living each day in a state of shame and frustration. Her physical pain was a constant reminder of her past lingering discomfort from a cosmetic surgery Hal had pressured her into before his death. While behind bars, she worked tirelessly on appeals, arguing that her attorney had failed to reveal the truth in court. Through her persistence, more people began to learn her side of the story. Among those willing to help was Dave Ranney, a retired journalist who had met Sarah while volunteering to teach job skills at the women's prison. After hearing everything, he wrote an article questioning, how could a jury convict Sarah without knowing the full truth? That's not justice, he added. The real question isn't whether she killed Hal. We know she did, but why? If you don't know the answer, ask those who work with survivors of abuse, and they'll tell you. Megan Steele, the executive director of a domestic violence advocacy center in Lyon, explained, "When someone provides you with a comfortable life, meets your needs, makes you dependent on them, and shapes your every action, you've lost your independence." The Kansas Reflector also raised tough questions in a related article. Why at the moment Sarah needed help most was no one there for her? And why has Kansas Governor Laura Kelly still not reviewed her sentence? Sarah's defense team began a detailed investigation gathering evidence that had been kept from the original trial. They submitted their findings to the Kansas Clemency Board, requesting a sentence reduction. On May 12, 2021, the board sent Sarah's clemency request to higher authorities. By May 25th, after reviewing all the documents, the court decided to cut her sentence from 50 years to 25. Newly elected Douglas County District Attorney Suzanne Valdez reached an agreement with Sarah in exchange for halving her sentence. Sarah would give up her right to appeal the reduction. Not everyone agreed with the decision. Anissa Sasko, Hal's ex-wife, said, "Every time this case is in the news, my daughters and I relive the nightmare. I think Sarah should stay in prison. She chose to stay and take his life. It was cruel and deliberate. I just hope people remember the real victims here and understand we live with this pain every single day because of what she did." Still, many believe this young woman deserves a second chance at life. From another perspective, Sarah is also a victim, one whose story is layered in tragedy. In a phone interview, Sarah said she had felt regret from the very moment the crime happened. She knew her actions had caused deep pain to many people, and admitted that if she could go back, she would never make the same choice again. Today, Sarah remains incarcerated at the Topeka Women's Prison. She spends a lot of time reflecting on what happened, and occasionally writes letters to God hoping for forgiveness. She's been given the opportunity to work in the Kansas State Training Service area, and now cares for a Labrador Retriever, a dog that has brought her a unique kind of healing. Mental health specialists have reevaluated her condition. Reports show her mental illness has stabilized and she is capable of leading a normal life. Sarah says that if she ever gets the chance to speak with the governor, she would show that she is no longer the confused, desperate young woman she once was. She's working every day to become better for her family and for society. In her own words, she feels like she has finally stepped out of the shadows and into the sunlight. Sarah's story of a young woman caught in the vortex of crime, both a victim and an offender, forces us to confront difficult questions about the fine line between good and evil, about justice and compassion. Some condemn Sarah, saying that her act of taking a life is unforgivable under any circumstances. They see the reduction of her sentence as an injustice to the victim and his family, pointing to the calculated nature of the crime and the planning that went into it. To them, Sarah remains a dangerous individual who should be kept away from society. But others empathize, recognizing in her a survivor of abuse, manipulation, and a childhood marked by misfortune. They believe it was the deep psychological wounds that pushed Sarah to her breaking point, stripping her of the ability to control her actions. In their eyes, she is more to be pitied than punished, someone who needs help to rebuild and rejoin the community. So where does the truth lie? Can we judge Sarah in absolute terms, purely right or purely wrong, entirely black or entirely white? Her story reminds us that life is rarely that simple. Behind every action lies a deeper cause, a backstory we cannot see at first glance. Perhaps the lesson here is empathy and understanding. We must learn to see situations from multiple angles, to place ourselves in another's shoes, and to grasp the struggles they have endured. At the same time, Sarah's case is a warning about the dangers of abuse and exploitation, and a call to protect children and support those most vulnerable in our society. Don't stay silent. Don't turn away from injustice. Speak up, because sometimes one small act can change the course of an entire life.